All right, guys, we're at that point, right? What do we do now? What do we do now? It's only responsible if we try to look to the future. There's a couple of good things that come out of doing these matches, right? We have resolution, and this whole sport is only one thing. It's conflict and then conflict resolution. We still have to wonder what you do next. It's very hard to bask in the glow. Like, imagine you're Islam. Really hard spot to be in. You got to go on the road. It's your first title defense. Your coach is now not going to be with you. The crowd, a 3-1 favorite over at DraftKings. I mean, the crowd is expecting you to win. So now if you go out and beat a world champion who's never lost, who, by the way, is ranked #1 in the world pound for pound, you don't really get your credit. It was expected. That's a hard way to leave the locker room, guys. It's a hard motivation. It's a hard way to keep that focus. When the whole world is telling you this other guy's got no shot, 3-1 you. Every upset in history involves one similar ingredient. The athlete who's upset found himself in a match that was harder than he thought it was going to be. You will go into every single environment with some level of expectation. And you might really plan for a bad day. You might think that you covered your bases. But if it turns out to be harder than you thought it was going to be, it's very hard to regroup. So I'm just sharing with you from Islam's perspective. Tough to do. Very tough to think you're going to move on. Right? You bring a Charles Oliveira, you sit him in the front row, just by example. What are you going to do with him? Charles Oliveira from Brazil just wanted to go out to Perth, Australia to watch fight? I mean, I don't put you guys as very smart guys, right? I know that I'm the professor here, but you're not that dumb. He was brought there for a reason. It's the weight class that he was just champion at. But they didn't turn to him. They didn't do anything with him. And again, I just want to go back to what Islam was up against. And just so you do understand, if Islam would have lost, do you see where there's really no need for Charles? Do you see where, oh my goodness, we got to rematch this, would come in and just make sense? So what do you do now? Dana White says this was record-setting, possibly record-breaking. I felt it. There was something big on that. Do you rematch him? It was certainly competitive. I don't know if you can get enough people to come out and scream fire for some of those positions. A third round where 2 minutes of it, Islam is on Volk's back, but Volk's hitting him. I mean, it was almost comical. Volk can't even see him. It's not as though he's ever prepared for that. It's not as though that's a strategy. I get that. It's still an ass-whipping contest. He still took a fist and ran it into the other guy's face repeatedly while not having that done to him. I think that that's interesting. I think there's a discussion there. I don't know if we're going to have it. I mean, it looks as though Volk has his answer. Can we agree on that? It looks as though Volk, who woke up today world champion and will wake up tomorrow world champion, now has a #1 contender, slides right back on down to 145, and he deals with Yair Rodriguez. That would be the path of least resistance. I don't know that Volk or company is really equipped with the tools that would be needed to shake that up, to stay at 55, to get the rematch. So we probably figured it out, right? Volk's probably headed down. He's going to deal with Rodriguez. Interesting match. Interesting match because we see guys when they get defeated never be the same. This was not that kind of fight. Volk was not hurt. Volk was not embarrassed. Volk was not knocked out. All the same, he will be going into his next fight different than he ever has before. He has never been walking in there off of a loss. Does that create an opportunity for Rodriguez? Great. Little bit of a storyline. Let's go back to Islam. So here you've got Islam at 155 pounds. We brought out Charles Oliveira, who you already dealt with. No other 55-pounders calling you out. You're not really good at doing this yourself. You know, those things really are important. I mean, there's times in this sport where we'll just look at some resumes. We'll just kind of look at a ranking and who did what. They'll both get a phone call. They never asked for it. We weren't heading that direction. They both get a phone call. That could be what happens here. I would have a very difficult time sitting before you guys with a straight face and any level of integrity and tell you that somebody else should have an opportunity that isn't Benny DeRouche. I'd have a really hard time doing that. Now, I could do it for this one. Because whether he's got 7 in a row or not, I can do it for this one because he's got an undefeated world champion coming in. It's just an anomaly. It's one of those things that falls in your lap. You got to go deal with it. But I bring that to you because the invincibility of Islam, I think, has been questioned. Now, that's up to you guys. I think it's been questioned. We saw him lose rounds. We saw him lose sequences. We saw him not just go out and dominate wrestling. No, in all fairness, he looked awesome. He looked like the best fighter in the world. These are good things. These are good, positive things. That means you're competing with the right guys. I just share with you. I would be very interested not only in that fight with Benny, I'd be interested in the line. Who would be the favorite in that? If you looked at what Benny just did and who he did it with, how hard he is to out-grapple, the size of him, the endurance and the pace, interesting fight. Possibly the direction we're going to go, but those guys aren't going to help themselves. Benny's not going to call for this fight. Islam's not going to go call for this fight. But it still seems like the one that we could do. And I do think that Islam needs to get right back on that horse real quick. I don't think it was fair what happened to him tonight. I don't think that's fair to be the heir apparent to the king, who, by the way, you find out isn't going to come corner you. You got to walk in a 3-1 dog. Everybody's booing you. You really have never done anything bad. You just called this guy short, right? I mean, not even profanity. It's a really tough spot. And then to not get any credit for it, I think that's hard. But that's life. And you pack up and you move forward. And I think the way to move forward and to get Islam the credit that he quite possibly deserves, put him in there with the right guy, who right now is Benny DeRouche.